Hello, talking to you today about the Khmer Empire in its fabulous city, Angkor. So in his anthropologist Michael D. Coe, in his book called Angkor and the Khmer Civilization, he says that there is no other archaeological site like Angkor, which was the capital of the Khmer Empire in what's now Cambodia. The Khmer Empire included areas, of course, Cambodia, but also good chunks of Thailand. For much of the history of the Mekong Delta, which is southern Vietnam, was also part of the Khmer Empire. So Southeast Asia, broadly, of course. So the classic Khmer Empire, which we'll mostly talk about, is the period from 802 to 1327, so the 9th century to the relatively early 14th century. And it was established as a universal monarch in 802. It would be a Brahmin priest had declared the first leader, Jayavarman II, as the first universal monarch of the Khmer Empire. So Varman means basically protected by. So when you're talking about different leaders in the Khmer Empire, when you see Varman at the end, it means protected by, and then whatever precedes that. So just the time frame, that's kind of the roots of it. Now there had been other kind of splintered empires and kingdoms before that, kingdoms being a better word for that, within what's now Cambodia today. But 802 is kind of the start of the classic period of the Khmer, and it ends in 1327 with the invasion of Thai armies. So the key aspects of the Khmer civilization, and through archaeological work that's done over the years, especially since the mid to late 19th century, when it was sort of rediscovered by Europeans. But a lot of the civilization is really sort of rooted. The foundation is rice production, and that even today in Cambodia, nearly half of the people are engaged in agriculture, and you could compare that to the United States, which is about 2%. So then and now, agriculture is kind of the main way of life, and especially in rice production. So in many places in Southeast Asia, the actual word for food is cooked rice. In the case of the Khmer, it's bai, B-A-I, and that means cooked rice or food, and in a lot of ways those things are synonymous. As I mentioned, there was this concept of a universal monarch, but the administration of the government went of course way beyond that. And so each province and village had bureaucrats that were ensuring the revenue that would come through, ultimately sort of making its way to Angkor, the capital city of the classic Khmer. Another key foundation would be that Hinduism or Buddhism being the state religion, depending on the different eras. So for instance, Angkor Wat, the famous building, which we'll talk about later, not just building, but religious complex, initially was dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu. But in later years, it would be converted over to Buddhism, to Buddhist practice. And so if you went to Angkor Wat today, it still would have, you would still see Buddhist monks in that area. Also, there were extensive public waterworks. So there were a series of canals and reservoirs. So this was a pretty developed empire at the time. And that, Michael Coe, the guy I mentioned earlier, as he said, that there's nothing that really compares to it in the archaeological world. But also, when you look at the size of the place Angkor, the city Angkor, 386 square miles. And as he mentions, it's basically about 10 times the size of what Tikal was in the Maya era in Mesoamerica. So in addition to these extensive public waterworks, we're a system of highways and causeways and bridges. So we see this in other classic civilizations like the Maya, and with these causeways, these sort of raised roads that connected different areas, different cities. And then a final thing that is good for the archaeology and the sort of learning about the past of the Khmer Empire is a lot of the religious architecture was in stone. whereas opposed to a lot of the houses were made of wood or thatched roofs and things of that nature. A lot of the religious architecture was in stone and has, survived into today. So everybody was taxed except a few groups. So the religious leaders, the priests, monks, and then of course slaves. And there was slavery in the Khmer Empire. And the era that after 1327 and as you get into the 14th, 15th century, that's kind of the post-classic era of Khmer, that slavery even expanded at that time and was then abolished under the French when the French colonized in that region. So we'll come back in just a minute and talk about Angkor.